Welcome, everyone. Today on the Pyrite Podcast, we have Lixin, CEO and founder of Keystone. I'm very happy to invite him to the Pyrite Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bon.
So I'll just give a very brief introduction of Lixin and his project. Lixin has a background in Bitcoin, and the reason why I've invited him to talk on the Pirate Podcast today is because I think Bitcoiners are often the OG of the OG. They usually start their journey in cryptocurrencies all the way back with Satoshi, the man himself, and because of that, they often inherit the security and philosophical concerns that motivated Satoshi to invent Bitcoin. So their culture is often very distinct. And I feel, for one, those concerns are still very, very relevant, if not ever more relevant today, though we mortals oftentimes don't know well enough how to actually execute upon those concerns and considerations. So I'm very excited today to learn more about how that translates into action, about Bitcoin maximalism, their culture, especially how that culture translate into questions and actions to enable and preserve decentralization, financial sovereignty, and most importantly, security best practices, which is something I think none of us do well enough. So before we start, ladies and gentlemen, nothing said here is to be taken as financial advice. Myself and my relations may or may not have positions in the project interview on this podcast. Do your own research, and this podcast is simply for educational and entertainment purposes. Furthermore, boys and girls, there's no need to take whatever said here to be an attack on the culture of any crypto community. We're just here to learn about how different people do things differently. Chill, okay? I think we can start with a short introduction of yourself. Can you tell us who you are, what's
Okay.
Keystone, and how you got
Okay.
into crypto?
Okay. First, thank you again for having me here. I'm so glad to be here to share my personal experience and also share something about Keystone and about how we see security both in crypto, both in Bitcoin and Web3 community. So for me, I'm Lixin. My name is Lixin. I'm the CEO of Keystone Hardware Wallet. And personally, the first time I got to know Bitcoin was back in 2009. I still remember that was around the Christmas of 2009. At that time, I was in college, and that was our job hunting season. So at that time, half of my time I was visiting different companies and go to different conferences for job hunting. And the other half of my time I was spending mostly online to search for new opportunities. And also, I was a super heavy user of Google Reader at that time. So around 2009, my Google Reader, all the feeds in my Google Reader were totally flooded by Bitcoin at that time. So I still remember that's around the Christmas of 2009. And that's the first time I knew Bitcoin. And I learned about Bitcoin, about all how it works under the hood. And at that time, I thought Bitcoin was really, really cool. And Satoshi Nakamoto's idea about Bitcoin is very pioneering. And but after reading all those stuff, I didn't feel that the consensus of Bitcoin can be reached because I don't have too much confidence in that. So I didn't get into Bitcoin at that time. And then time goes to 2013. At that time, I just started a startup in Shanghai together with some of my college classmates. And they were graduated from Stanford computer science major for their master degree. And at that time, we were working on some kind of AR, augmented reality project at that time. And one of them told me that, hey, Lixin, you should check out Bitcoin. The price is going up. I remember that the price was around $100 in 2013. And so I thought that, oh, Bitcoin, I knew it. I checked it out long before. How's it going right now? So I checked the price. I went to Mt. Gox, and surprisingly, I found that seems like the consensus of Bitcoin has been reached, and the whole network is pretty solid and secure at that time. And a lot of people are buying Bitcoin at that time. So that's the first time I bought my Bitcoin in 2013. But my own career didn't encounter with Bitcoin until 2017. Before that, I was mostly working on a drone project, and we were selling our drone in the United States mostly. And in 2017, I left the company and I started to make hardware. So that's the year when Keystone was born. And for the product, and then because I was a Bitcoiner before, so after we started to make the hardware wallet, we put most of our time dedicated to Bitcoin security, and we were deeply engaged in the Bitcoin maximalist community in the United States as well as in the Europe, and we delivered some really like really tough or really hardcore security features on our product, and the maximalists really love that. And in the middle of last year, we started to pivot to Web3, and luckily, after we started working on Web3 for 2 months, we got green lighted from MetaMask to get our product integrated with MetaMask. So we released our integration with MetaMask extension in last December. And just 2 weeks ago, we also released the MetaMask mobile integration. So our hardware wallet, Keystone, is the only cross-platform hardware wallet right now to work with MetaMask. And right now, we're also expanding our exposure in Web3 and talking to other software wallets for integrations and to better serve the community. So this is where I come from and how Keystone was born and where we are right now.
Okay, so let us dive into the discussion by talking about Bitcoin and the world of Bitcoin maximalists. I want to start
Yeah,
here, particularly because I recently read a very interesting piece by Vitalik, which was
yeah,
strangely
yeah,
launched on
yeah,
1st of April
yeah,
Fools, titled "In Defense of Bitcoin Maximalism." I think it's a
yeah,
little bit sad that in the Web3 community, Bitcoin maximalists are sort of considered to be outcasts, but I do think that they are they're right on certain issues. And Vitalik basically outlined why they think like that and why there's utility, there's good in how they think like that. So
yes,
to outline that, basically, Vitalik made several arguments as to why Bitcoin maximalism, as annoying and as bewildering to those of us who are in the rest of DeFi and Web3 might seem, it is actually a
yeah,
very necessary and good ideology. So he wrote that Bitcoin and his
mm-hmm,
maximalism is like the file of Galadriel, a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out. It is a
mm-hmm,
light that sacrifices all dimensions to optimize for one thing and one thing only.
mm-hmm.
So I suppose my question is, what's inside the set of things that Bitcoin maximalists care most about?
Okay, that's a that's a really broad question. But first, I want to say that I really love the standing point of Vitalik. I'm not sure if you know that Vitalik, when Vitalik joined the crypto community, he worked for Bitcoin magazine at that time. So he
Mm-hmm.
fully understand where does Bitcoin come from and what's the idea of Bitcoin and what's the thesis of Bitcoin. So he can totally understand that. And then he left Bitcoin magazine and created Ethereum because of he played a game and he was like trapped in that game. And so he started Ethereum to build up a like a world computer so that people can not only store their value on the blockchain, but also run the code on the blockchain. And then comes with all the smart contracts, all the EVM, the DeFi, the NFT, everything. So first, I really admire Vitalik's standing point as he should have been a Bitcoin maximalist at some point, and he knew totally about Satoshi Nakamoto's vision as well as the whole Bitcoin maximalist community. So I totally agree what he wrote in that article. And for your question, actually Bitcoin maximalist, they're someone that's really different from Web3 community. For example, Bitcoin maximalists, the Bitcoin community, or we call them Bitcoiners, they really care about decentralization and financial sovereignty. For example, I can share some examples. Bitcoin maximalists are really, really proud that Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared, because if we know that Satoshi Nakamoto is somewhere in the middle of the United States, that's a huge single point failure for the whole Bitcoin community, and that's also damaging the decentralization uh, of Bitcoin and the whole thesis of Bitcoin. And also recently, I saw a post on Twitter saying that one of the core developers of Bitcoin community, once I think it's in back in 2012 or 2011, he wrote a post on the Bitcoin forum saying that I'm invited by FBI to talk about Bitcoin, talk about how Bitcoin works, and what's the vision of Bitcoin, this kind of stuff. So he just disclosed that he's invited by FBI by that. And the interesting part is after that post, Satoshi Nakamoto totally disappeared. So this is also, I think, for this is very important for some project like Bitcoin to be totally or to be maximized decentralized. And also there's another saying, Bitcoin maximalists, they're really proud, is that they're always saying that there's no marketing department in Bitcoin. So this means that Bitcoin spread the information, spread the consensus just based on people, real people, rather than no one's pushed by some VC, by some ventures, by token funds, or by some personal interest, by some personal, like driven by money to promote Bitcoin. But people just uh, agrees with Bitcoin's value, agree with Bitcoin's vision, so that people are promoting Bitcoin. That's really cool, and that's pushing Bitcoin more and more decentralized, rather than some kind of centralized project controlled by some VC or a small group of people, but on the surface telling people they're quote unquote decentralized. So that's something Bitcoin maximalists are really, really proud of. And also, they really, really care about financial sovereignty. For example, the people in Bitcoin community, they are really proud when they want to quote unquote attack Ethereum community. One thing they usually bring up is that it's very hard for someone to manage a Ethereum node by himself. So it's very costly, and you need very big hard drive as well as computer or some like other equipment to maintain a Ethereum node. And also from figures wise, Ethereum nodes are going down from time to time. But for Bitcoin, it's relatively easy for you to set up a Bitcoin node. It only costs like several $100. You just buy a Raspberry Pi and a SSD hard drive, and then you can run, and you have Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi or Ethernet, then you can run a Bitcoin node. So this is also related to the previous point I just shared about decentralization. If it's very easy for people to run a node, not only just manage their own keys, but also run a node so that people can verify all the transactions by themselves, that's also part of the financial sovereignty considered by Bitcoin maximalists. So they're saying in Bitcoin maximalist that if you use a hardware wallet to manage your private key as well as running a Bitcoin node by yourself, then you are the quote unquote first class citizen in the citadel of Bitcoin. So that's very interesting among Bitcoin community. And also another thing Bitcoin maximalists that they really care about is permissionlessness, which means that they are always seeking for like non-KYC services. So a real Bitcoin maximalist, if he wants to buy some Bitcoin, he won't do that on Coinbase or other centralized services, because those are KYC services. Usually they do on some offline or some Bitcoin ATMs or some platforms like BitKey, so that they can buy Bitcoin without any KYC information. This is also, they're trying to maximize the privacy of their own identity. So it's totally different. The whole ideation, the whole methodology and thesis is different from the Web3 community as well as Ethereum. Yeah.
I definitely find that kind of culture very appealing and very interesting. I, for one, bought my first. I didn't buy a whole Bitcoin, but I first bought my Bitcoin on a non KYC platform called localbitcoins.com. So
Oh.
yeah, I definitely resonate with that, and I understand how that works. And so I feel like what I would also be interested in understanding is that how does that kind of culture inform the view of Bitcoin maximalists towards other Web3 projects and the rest of crypto? Like, how do they see the rest of crypto and
Hmm.
Ethereum and all these other new chains that have come up? How do they view
Hmm.
them?
Hmm. Okay, so there are some Bitcoiners. Some Bitcoiners, they are really, really extreme, so that they really, really hate Web3 and Ethereum. But for some other guys, they love Bitcoin, and they also see Web3 and see Ethereum from a more like radical perspective. So like just like for me, from my perspective, why we started to tackle Web3 to enter the Ethereum world is because I strongly feel that even though we cannot deny that, even though there are a lot of scams in the Web3, in Ethereum, there are a lot of rug pulls, scams, and other hacks in the Web3 community, and the user um, the product are not very user friendly. It's hard to understand, especially for those DeFi stuff. You can put layers upon layers. But I still feel that the most charming part of Web3 is innovation. So for Bitcoin, Bitcoin is more about steadiness, which means Bitcoin is trying to achieve the goal that everyone on the world can easily secure their digital assets, and that secure means really, really secured. So no single point failure, no one can take away your assets. That's something Bitcoin is trying to achieve. So Bitcoin is really, really steady, and it's becoming more and more robust. I can share an example. For example, some developers in the Bitcoin community, they are looking into some problems. For example, if you download the Bitcoin core code from GitHub, and if you wanted to run that code before you run the Bitcoin core code on your computer, you need to compile that code into the machine code. And some of the Bitcoiners, they're looking into the problem that how to ensure that the compile tool working as expected. So it compiles the Bitcoin core code you download from GitHub to generate something you really want. So they're looking these kind of problems to make Bitcoin more and more robust, and no one can hack it, or no one can put some malicious stuff into Bitcoin. And that's why Bitcoin is trying to keep the whole system as simple as possible, because complication is the biggest enemy for security, for robustness. So that's where Bitcoin stands for. But that also limited the imagination of the Bitcoin chain. So that's why I think that's why Ethereum is so strong. Ethereum is taking a lot of people into the community, because there are so many innovations on Ethereum. For example, the DeFi, the NFT, and right now the GameFi, and also other innovations. It's really, really cool. And also, Ethereum community are heavily talking about sign-in with Ethereum. This kind of like scenarios, user scenarios, and applications. That's super cool. And also, people are building DAOs based on the thesis of Ethereum to run something it's impossible to run like 10 years ago, even with Bitcoin. For example, the Constitution DAO. I really love that, actually. And also, that's the reason why we were convinced to start working on Web3 and the Ethereum community from a Bitcoiner before. So that's how I see, how I view Bitcoin versus Web3, and how we were convinced into the Web3 community. Yeah.
That is very interesting. I definitely agree with the fact that Ethereum is a lot more complicated than from Bitcoin. Like, for example, Solidity's language has
Yeah.
already what, 8 versions and 14 subversions after the eighth version. And for even transfer functions, there are already multiple iterations, and each one of them had prior problems. There are 3 types of data storage, including storage, memory, and core data, and it's not all of them are backwards compatible.
Yeah.
And then there's like every single new iteration generates new problems, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to keep up. It's very difficult to keep up, and for those who can keep up, somehow they have a asymmetric disadvantage. And if they are naughty and they do something nasty, that they
Yeah.
can leverage that kind of knowledge to hack. Where I suppose Bitcoin,
Yeah.
it's like very simple. There's nothing here. This is what you get. You can't hack it because there's nothing you can really do
Yeah.
to go through the nooks and crannies of things. I
Yeah.
suppose I would like to follow this up with a question of how. So we've talked about the philosophy. We've talked about how they view things, how they view themselves, and how they view others. So
Mhm.
how does that philosophical outlook translate into action in terms of financial behavior and perhaps security practices? So
Mhm.
what do they like? Like what are some of the practices that they engage in and encourage others to engage in?
Okay. So first, I want to echo what you have just said about backward compatibility. There's another interesting fact that in the development of Bitcoin, you can see that Bitcoin developers never do any hard fork. So it's
Mm,
soft fork as always. So it's always, no matter how important the feature is or how hard the development is, they're trying their best to put every improvement as a soft fork. But for Ethereum, I think it's relatively easy to make a decision that, oh, we should hard fork the Ethereum to add some more features. And yeah, I think those bring innovation, but also sometimes it's not steady, and sometimes it bring new attack vectors for the hacker uh, to hack the users or hack the projects. Yeah, and that's something I really want to echo to for something you have just shared. And for your question about
I
the
want to echo this as well. Like before we
yeah.
talk about the privacy, the parts, like how Bitcoiners translate their philosophical outlook into privacy actions and financial behavior. I want to ask a further question to just
Mhm.
follow up on that. Do
Yeah.
For Bitcoiners who are not totally allergic or antagonistic to Ethereum, I presume if they're Bitcoin maximalists, they would like Ethereum Classic better.
Mm, I think that's hard to say because,
Okay.
yeah, for me, I'm like half a Bitcoiner and half a Web3 guy right now, and also I
Mm,
know some Bitcoin maximalists. They are converting into Web3, and they see more and more value in Web3 and in Ethereum. So I think it's really dynamic right now, and
mm,
more and more people are getting open minded. And also, we cannot deny that Bitcoin is also bringing new people into the community because, like the thing in El Salvador, so
mm.
that's also a big thing for Bitcoin. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Okay.
How
Uh-huh.
does that philosophical outlook translate into financial behavior and privacy practices?
Okay. So here, the first thing I want to share is that Bitcoin community and the Web3 community, they really, for just like you mentioned, for privacy, they really see privacy from a different angle, and it also applies to some of the schemes of how the chains work and how the wallet work. For example, in Bitcoin community, you know that Bitcoin is not account model, but it's UTXO model, right? So uh, that's in UTXO model, all the wallets they when you wanted to use a software wallet to receive some Bitcoin, usually that wallet generate a new address for you. So it's not suggested in the Bitcoin community to reuse your Bitcoin address, but generate a new address every time because it's a UTXO model. So even though you have tens of addresses with tens of UTXOs for Bitcoin, it doesn't affect your transaction fees. And but you can get a feature of you abandon one address each time, so you are protecting your privacy. And also for privacy wise, on Ethereum, people are tend to use one or even one address as their Ethereum account, because Ethereum is account model. So people are taking that account right now. People are taking that Ethereum account as their like identity, as their DID on chain, and people are also using other products, other protocols like ENS. Uh, Actually, from a perspective of privacy, that's a really bad practice, because if you are using one address every time, and if you're using ENS, that's exposing some of your privacy, and it's relatively easy for a hacker to get your tracks and to understand what you're doing on chain, and to learn all the financial activities you are working on chain. So that's the difference on privacy. And also another example for privacy is that in Bitcoin community, especially for the Bitcoin maximalist, they always use some kind of coin mix wallet. The most famous ones are Wasabi wallet and the Samurai wallet. Uh, for those two wallets, actually, you can, when you are sending your Bitcoin is mixed with others' Bitcoin, so that services like chain analysis cannot easily track who owns those addresses, or uh, to hack them, or for hackers or something like that. But in Ethereum community, people um, I know there are some kind of coin mix services out there, for example, Tornado. But Tornado, to be very honest, there are very few users using Tornado right now. And also using Tornado will cost more for the transaction fees. And also using, sometimes we see Tornado are like the hackers hack a exchange and then put their Ethereum in the Tornado. So uh, few people are using that, and that's designed mostly for people who care privacy. But the real situation is that the real users are the hackers to use coin mix services like Tornado. But in Bitcoin community, just normal Bitcoin maximalists, they will use coin mix services. That's one thing on the financial behavior difference. And another thing is that in Bitcoin community, because people are always uh, in Bitcoin, there's not too much innovation, and people are always looking for a better solution to protect their Bitcoin, to protect their financial sovereignty. And one result of that is that a lot of people in the Bitcoin community, they use multisig to protect their Bitcoin. And but in Ethereum community, if you want to use multisig, that's not easy to use. First, you need to use some kind of service like Gnosis Safe. The second is you need to download a specific wallet made by Gnosis team. And if you wanted to set up the multisig on Ethereum and then use that multisig to interact with other decentralized applications, the transaction fees are much, much higher than if you're using a single sig account of Ethereum. So that's the reason that very few people in Ethereum community are using multisig. So the multisig are usually used by DAOs or by some token funds or by some enterprise users in the Ethereum community. But in Bitcoin community, a daily user will use multisig to help better protect their Bitcoin. And on the technical side, it's also different for Bitcoin multisig and Ethereum multisig. On Bitcoin, with Bitcoin, the multisig was naturally embedded on Bitcoin main chain. But in Ethereum, if you want to do multi-sig, actually that's a smart contract for multi-sig, which introduce a relatively bigger attack surface for the multi-sig. So I think those are some of the basic difference for the financial behavior in Bitcoin community and Ethereum community.
Do you think we will eventually see DeFi built on top of Bitcoin? I think
Mm-hmm.
Stacks is one such attempt. The heavy use of Bitcoin as backing by the Terra blockchain, I suppose, is another. Arthur Hayes also wrote about the possibility of El Salvador issuing national debt instruments, paying out in Bitcoin or collateralized by Bitcoin. Surely, if hyper Bitcoinization is inevitable, Bitcoin DeFi should also be inevitable. Will there be Bitcoin DeFi?
That's a very good question. So I think right now in the Bitcoin community, there are a lot of people trying to, let's say, replicate the DeFi schemes in Ethereum community back to Bitcoin. Uh, some are using some layer two chains with Bitcoin to realize that DeFi stuff. But to be very honest, for me, from my perspective, I think sci-fi built around Bitcoin will come first before DeFi built upon Bitcoin. For example, I really love the idea of the just you mentioned the national debt of El Salvador. I think that because actually sci-fi is more user friendly and easier for mass adoption if we put sci-fi and DeFi together. No matter how hard you put in, how hard work you put into DeFi, I think in the next few years, the user experience of DeFi cannot reach the same level as sci-fi. So I'm imagining a situation which is people are introduced into Bitcoin security, into Bitcoin community with those sci-fi product, for sci-fi financial product, for example, ETF or the national debt I just mentioned. And I think that's the best bridge to introduce more people from the concept of the traditional financial world into Bitcoin. And after that, I think some of them will get a better image, a clear image about Bitcoin, and then they may start to do like self custody or to run their own node, this kind of stuff. And also another reason I'm not a huge fan of DeFi on Bitcoin is that I still think that if you put DeFi on Bitcoin and DeFi on Ethereum as two competitors, I think DeFi on Bitcoin cannot compete with DeFi on Ethereum because on Ethereum, as its tooling uh, uh, compete, you can do EVM coding on Ethereum so that you can put many different things together. For example, right now I know some projects they are working on DeFi for NFT. So you can collateral your valuable NFT like Bored Ape and borrow some Ethereum or some stable coins to work on other like financial services to put into other financial services. I think for Bitcoin, DeFi on Bitcoin, it's almost impossible to compete with that kind of almost infinity possibilities in the Ethereum community building on DeFi. Yeah.
I suppose the problem is that the ship has sailed. Like
Yeah,
Ethereum has really amassed a huge amount of tooling. There's a lot of infrastructure already built. The code,
definitely.
the resources to learn how to code in Solidity has absolutely overwhelmed all other possibilities. What
Yeah.
I feel is regrettable is that Bitcoin, it will seem to be the only chain left that is proof of work. And I personally feel, and I'm sure most Bitcoiners agree with me, proof of work is
Yeah.
one of the core reasons and core um, components in maintaining a high level of decentralization and openness for anybody to come in
Yeah.
and participate, right? Because if it's
Yeah.
proof of stake, you need to first onboard your fiat into Ethereum, which
Yeah.
inevitably most likely involves a KYC decentralized exchange, whereas
Mhm.
for a work proof of work system, you can just literally go down to your local computer shop and buy the necessary components and just set up at your home, which makes you to be a truly sovereign individual. So that is a great pity, and I personally hope that there will be more proof of work
Mhm.
chains out there in the future, and who would be DeFi compatible. Let us talk about a little something else. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about more about security best practices. To those of
Okay.
us who are not very familiar with crypto security best practices or crypto hygiene, what would you recommend us to start doing first? So, what are some security practices one can take a page out of the book of Bitcoin maximalists? Like what to do first?
Okay. So uh, even though I'm selling hardware wallet and I want to sell as many as possible, but I still want to share with you and with your audiences that actually I'm sharing this on every AMAs and podcast, which is hardware wallet is not your silver bullet for security. So people tend to, because a lot of influencers on Twitter are shouting out like, you should buy a hardware wallet for security. You should have a hardware wallet. You should use hardware wallet with MetaMask. Blah 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 blah. But to be very honest, from a security perspective, hardware wallet is definitely not your silver bullet. The most important thing, or the first step to start with, actually, it's very simple. I suggest everyone around me to read a book called Mastering Bitcoin. So first, you need to understand how everything works, especially how a software wallet works. For example, how the recovery phrase or the seed phrase works, how it's derived into your masked private key, and derived into your child private keys and extended private public keys, as well as your addresses, and how does the derivation path work, everything like this, and how does signing work. So I think that's the most important thing before you start self custody your private keys. And another very interesting story I can share is that several days ago, one of my friend asked me. She told me that she was hacked by a hacker, and she told me that she took a picture of her recovery phrase in her mobile phone, and then I said, "Oh, most likely." Your recovery phrase were hacked and were stolen by the hacker, so that the hacker is can steal all your digital assets. So she was really shocked. She asked me that, oh, I just put my recovery phrase in my mobile phone, but I didn't share the password of my MetaMask. So she told me that the hacker doesn't know the password of her MetaMask. Then she said, why can he hack me? He doesn't have my password. So that's kind of, maybe from you and my eyes, that's ridiculous. But from a normal user, I think maybe a lot of users are thinking like this. So I think the knowledge is the most important thing for everyone to start with. That's the most important thing. And then another suggestion is that I wanted to share with people. I always say that you should be really, really careful with your recovery phase. Just like the case I shared, people just put their recovery phase in some random place, or even they just put their like write down their recovery phase in the note application in their mobile phone, or even take a picture and put that on iCloud or any other like cloud service for storage of the pictures. That's really, really dangerous. So the second thing I want to share is you should be really careful with your recovery phase. You should write it down or use some kind of product of the metal storages of the recovery phase, and you should protect it very well, and don't take it out every time. Don't take it out very often. So once you hide it, it's better than you never take it out, because every time you take your recoveries out of the shelf or out of your somewhere you hide it, it's kind of risky for someone to know where you hide your recovery phase. So that's really, really important. And another thing I really want to share is that um, uh, people are underestimating in Web3 community. People are underestimating the importance of sign a transaction. So a lot of friends around me, when the MetaMask or the hardware wallet ask them to sign a transaction, they just simply sign a transaction without looking into what's the transaction, or what's the software asking to sign. A very interesting fact is that in the physical world, when you are trying to sign a document, you have a perfect sense. Usually, you have a perfect sense to read about the agreement, what the agreement says, what's the privileges, and do I need to? What's the situation? What's the result if I break those rules? People are really sensitive about that. But when it comes to Web3 world, people are much less sensitive about signing. So that's really important, and that's something I really want to share with you guys. So when you are signing a transaction, be really careful with what you are signing, because any malicious signing could make you, sometimes the hacker just makes some changes or trying to hack you through phishing sites. And with that, signing the transaction, they don't need to steal your private keys. They don't need to steal your recovery phrase. They can steal all. Then they can steal all your digital assets remotely. So that's also very dangerous. So that's something I want to share. And based on your digital assets, you can also consider buying a hardware wallet to protect you from other hacks, like some iCloud hacks, something like that. Yeah.
So I think that provides us a very good springboard to talk a little bit more about why one should buy a hardware wallet. Like, why buy one? Why buy one?
Mm, so the first thing I want to share is that uh, if you just use a software wallet, for example, if you use your software wallet, first the concept I want to share is that there's no absolute security in this world. So security is always a relative concept, which means there's only relatively secure rather than absolute secure. Everything you do is not a perfect solution. Everything you do is simply building up the cost for a hacker to hack you. So you can assume that hackers are someone very reasonable and very simple. They just do a simple math. If they can steal $1 million crypto assets from you, and the cost for them is like $10,000, of course they will do it. But if they hack you with a cost like $10 million, but the result is only get like $1 million crypto assets, then no hacker on this planet will do it. So it's just simple math. So for an everyday user, what you do is building up the cost for a hacker to hack you. So if you put a hardware wallet versus a software wallet together, the first thing you should understand is that uh, even though you're using a Trezor, because Trezor are blamed by the community that there's no secure element in the Trezor, even though you're using a Trezor, it's also relatively safer than just using a software wallet. Because using a software wallet, you are putting your private keys in the software, and your software is connected to the internet. There's one project called Nexus Mutual. All the whale users, and just like I mentioned, Ethereum Web3 users are not so sensitive about privacy. So it's very easy for a hacker to find you through your Twitter handle, through the locations you share on social media, through your ENS, through your email account, this kind of thing. They can find your IP and they can hack you remotely easily. So in those kind of situations, to have a better protection, you should have a hardware and put your recovery phrase, put your seed in that hardware rather than in a software. So that's something I want to share from a like general perspective. But if we look into deeper into those attack vectors, for example, recently a iPhone user was hacked. A MacBook user was hacked because when he was using MetaMask, he just duplicated the private keys into iCloud by the MetaMask. And in that case, even though the recovery phrase on MetaMask was encrypted by the password of the MetaMask, but the problem is people tend to use the same password for different platforms, and then the hacker and maybe his password was leaked by some other hack incidents of some other websites, but the hacker knew his common password he usually use. So the hacker hack his iCloud and get the encrypted uh, encrypted files of the MetaMask, and then use his uh, normal password to decrypt that file so that the hacker still, if I remember correctly, it was around $650,000 of crypto assets.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's a huge loss for normal people. Yeah, and also there are some other attack surfaces. For example, right now that's a little bit techy, but right now most of the wallets are built upon JavaScript, and when a developer developing a JavaScript application, one thing almost everyone will use is npm. So npm is a like package management tool for the developers. They don't need to rebuild. They don't need to rebuild the wheel every time. They just download a like commonly used npm package from the npm management tool, package management tool, so that they can easily build their application upon those code. And actually, that's also another big attack surfaces, big attack surface. I just read a post by a security research company saying that they found a npm in the npm pool, which is generating the which is used for private key generation. And they found one line of malicious code that after generating the recovery phrase, the npm will upload the recovery phrase into the hacker's Amazon cloud. So if you use a software wallet that use that specific npm, and then your recovery phrase was totally leaked to the hacker. So if you use a software wallet, there's a lot of this kind of attack surfaces. And also, for example, if you use software wallet, another common mistake is that people may copy paste their recovery phrase from the software wallet to someone else, and then the clipboard of your computer can be hacked by a third party application. Maybe it's another application, maybe it's a very like niche application you randomly download it from the internet, and that application has the access to your clipboard. So when you are copying your recovery phrase or something, um, the application can hijack your clipboard and get your recovery phrase. So all these are different kinds of attack surfaces, and overall, to avoid those attack surfaces on your laptop or on your mobile phone, it's relatively safer to use a hardware wallet to protect your recovery phrase. Yeah.
That's a lot of attack vectors. So
Yeah.
how did all that factor into the design of Keystone? How did that affect you in your design philosophy?
Okay, okay. So for the design philosophy of Keystone, actually, when we started to build Keystone, we did some user research. For example, I interviewed a lot of Ledger users. The first question I asked them is that, or one of the most important questions I asked them is that, what's the most anxious time when you're using your ledger? The answers were pretty aligned. Almost everyone told me that there are two moments they were super anxious about. The first moment is when they are trying to type in all the recovery phrase on their ledger. That's the first most anxious time when they were using their ledger. The second anxious time is that when they are plugging their ledger into the computer, they are also super anxious because they don't know what information is getting into their ledger through the USB cable. They don't know what's the information getting out of the ledger through the USB cable. So after that interview with those ledger users, we have some very early rough ideas about Keystone. So first thing we want to do is that we decided that Keystone should have a big touch screen because uh, uh, because obviously the big touchscreen can improve the user experience of typing the recovery phrase, but the big touchscreen can also significantly improve the user experience of the whole interaction with the hardware wallet. And we see that user experience is super important for security because human error is the biggest reason for crypto loss. So user experience is very important. And also some of the users we interviewed, they were Ledger users before, but after they bought Ledger, they felt that this little device was so hard to use. So they just put that away, put that in the drawer so that they no longer use that. That's also some kind of compromise on their security because they cannot bear the user experience of Ledger. So that's why we have the first big decision is adding a big touchscreen, and also that can make the user very easily to migrate from a mobile phone to our device because the user experience is very close to your mobile phone experience. That's the first thing. The second thing about the USB cable, we also agree with those users that people have confidence or people have the feeling of security because transparency is really important because they know what's happening under the hood. And that's why we have the feature of QR code signing, which means that we use QR code to transfer those information between your software wallet, like your MetaMask and your Keystone. And all the uh, QR codes are non-encrypted so that you can decode that QR code with open source tools. And if you want, you can know exactly what's getting into your hardware wallet and what's getting out of your hardware wallet. So we really love the idea of Keystone because it brings the transparency for the user. So users are more confident about using the product. People are more confident about using um, about to interact with the hardware wallet. And another big benefit of QR code is that QR code has much less connectivity issues compared to USB. So if you are a Ledger user, you must know that after you get your Ledger connected to your laptop, sometimes the portal was not very tight and you slightly touch the USB cable and the connection was broken. And then you need to remove it. You need to unplug it and plug in again and to type the pin code of your ledger and to restart everything. So that's really bad user experience, and it's not for that's even hurting the hardware wallet adoption for the mass users. That's why we have the QR code, which has much less connectivity issues compared to USB. And another huge benefit of QR code is that QR code is cross-platform compatible. And from the example of integration with MetaMask, we are integrated with not only MetaMask extension, but also MetaMask Mobile, which means that if you want to use Keystone, if you wanted to manage your digital assets on your laptop, you can easily do that. Or if you wanted to use that, if you want to do that on the go, maybe out of your office, out of your home, you can still do that with Keystone plus your mobile phone, and you don't need to like import your recovery phrase into MetaMask Mobile, and you don't need to compromise your security, but doing all the signing, all the digital assets management on the go. So that's why the biggest differences between our product and the Ledger is that we have a big touchscreen to improve the UX and lower the possibility for human error, and we use QR code to interact with software wallet as such as MetaMask. Yeah, that's the main difference. The biggest difference, as well as the design philosophies behind our product. Yeah.
You mentioned before about this idea of blind signing. Can you
Yeah.
discuss a little bit more about how, like, what it is, what are some best practices to not do it, and what are some parts of your product that prevent us from doing something that I presume in the Bitcoin maximalist community would consider to be extremely stupid?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, I think you must heard of one motto, which is don't trust, verify. This
Mhm.
also don't trust or verify also applies to when you're using a hardware wallet. So basically, a hardware wallet, if you are using a hardware wallet, basically you are assuming that your software wallet is not enough, so that you for every transaction your software wallet ask your hardware wallet to sign, you need to manually check all the information of this transaction and then sign the transaction on your hardware wallet. You always assume your software wallet is not safe, and your software wallet can be hacked, and all the signing information can be swapped into the hacker's information. One thing I can share, one interesting fact I can share is that the very, very first generation of Ledger, there's no screen on Ledger. You just have buttons on Ledger, but no screen. That's heavily blamed by the Bitcoiners, because the Bitcoiners buy a hardware wallet. They just want to view the details of the transaction. For example, who am I sending to, and what is the change address, and how much is the transaction fee. This kind of key information on the device, and then they can confirm and they can sign. But at that time, the very first generation of Ledger, they don't have a screen to realize that. And then comes with Ledger Nano S. It comes with a small screen so that you can check some basic information of the transaction. But blockchain is developing really, really fast nowadays. I think people's interaction with blockchain is not only sending and receiving your crypto, but also interactions with smart contract, for example, with DeFi and with NFT. For example, let's take everyone knows Uniswap. Let's take Uniswap as an example. When you are signing, for example, you are swapping your Ethereum, your W Ethereum or your Ethereum into USDC on Uniswap. Actually, you are sending a transaction to interact with the Uniswap smart contract. And at the same time, you need to tell the smart contract what you want to do with this smart contract. For example, you are swapping your Ethereum to your USDC. That's something you need to tell the smart contract to do. And also that's some of the, we call it input data or parameters you are sending to the Uniswap smart contract. And one of the most important parameter you send to Uniswap smart contract is that the receiving address of this swapping interaction. So blind signing means that when you're signing a Uniswap transaction on Ledger, you can only confirm the smart contract address of Uniswap. You are doing swapping, but you cannot confirm the destination address of you receiving the crypto after this swapping interaction. That's blind signing. And that means that if the hacker can hack your MetaMask and the hacker can change the destination address of this swapping into the hacker's own address, and then after this swapping, all the USDC will go to the hacker's address, but you cannot verify that on Ledger. You just blindly sign the transaction, and all your crypto go to all your USDC go to the hacker's place, go to the hacker's address. And this is not something just in theory. Actually, in late 2020, uh, a very famous project called Nexus Mutual, the CEO of Nexus Mutual was encountered into this situation. His MetaMask was hacked, and the hacker tricked him into blind signing a. I'm not sure what's the exact transaction was, but it was a smart contract transaction, and the hacker swapped some of the key parameters of that transaction, and the CEO of Nexus Mutual got hacked for over $8 million at that time. Right now, I think that crypto was around 20 million to $30 million.
That is certainly a huge hack. So
You were
blind
shocked,
signing is,
right?
yeah, I am. Like, it's an inordinate amount of money.
Yeah.
So definitely something that we should not really do blind signing. So
Yeah.
I think another question that we might want to learn about is that how should we organize our wallets? Like if you have like
Mm,
100
great.
wallets, how do
Yeah.
you organize them? Do you have any rule of thumbs that you would suggest to the ordinary user?
Okay. Okay. First, I want to share a general idea, which is uh, a a a more secure solution is always less user friendly. So when you
Mm,
are, for example, if I give you, for example, if we make a hardware wallet for some military use or for the U.S. government, maybe that hardware wallet is super complicated to use and comes with like a 100 pages menu for you how to use that hardware wallet. That's impossible for a daily user. But I just wanted to convey the information, to convey the understanding that there's always a conflict between security and the user experience. So when it comes to how you design or how you use wallets, it applies to the same situation. For example, right now you're playing a GameFi, and that GameFi, for example, you're playing DeFi Kingdoms, and you are signing like 10 times, let's say 10 times an hour or like 20 times an hour. In those kind of situation, using a hardware wallet will sacrifice your user experience. Or, for example, you're trying to mint an NFT, uh, mint an NFT on in public when it just published to the public, and you need to finish that within like several seconds. In those situations, it's not suitable to use a hardware wallet because hardware wallet is safer, but the user experience is always more complicated and not that quick or easy to use. So a general suggestion is that also I see a lot of people are doing this in the community right now. They have several wallets. For example, they can just put some of their pocket money into a MetaMask and just use MetaMask as the software wallet solely, so that it can quickly interact with some like GameFi projects, or they wanted to mint an NFT in several seconds. That's also one scenario. And for example, if you wanted to protect your Bored Ape, that's worth over like $300,000 right now, then you can put that Bored Ape into an address, and the address private keys were protected by your hardware wallet. So I strongly recommend people that you should have your, we call it hot wallet and the cold wallet. So you put your pocket money in a hot wallet, or you just use that on a daily basis or sign the transaction very easily. But for your valuable digital assets, you just put that into the addresses that the private keys of those addresses are held in your hardware wallet. So that's a general um, suggestion for the people who want to protect their digital assets. And if you wanted to have some even deeper protection for digital assets, you can also leverage other features or other products like multisig. You can use say safe to do multisig to better protect your hardware wallet, to better protect your digital assets. Yeah.
So that is a great answer. I think. Can you tell? I think when I read some of your articles about
Yeah.
how to about some of the features, I came across this very interesting feature called Shamir-backups. I think it
Yeah.
reminded me about how Vitaly Buterin split his C phrase into two parts. One
Yeah.
he gave to his parents, and one he kept for himself. And
Mhm.
one of the troubles with that arrangement was that when I think was it the Shi people or is it the Doge people sent almost half of the supply to his wallet, he couldn't really withdraw it and then send it out somewhere else. So
Mhm.
yeah, I suppose can you tell me a little bit more about Keystone's feature, Shamir-backups, and how does that factor into your design philosophy, and what is it?
Okay, so here the basic we also did some user research about how people protect their recovery phrase. So people usually some people they just have one um, replication. They just have one copy of their recovery phrase and hide that at their in the home, and that's not very good because, for example, if your house got on fire and then your recovery phrase will totally burned. And some people they replicated their recovery phrase and put that in different places. For example, one copy at home, one copy in the office. That's something a little bit better than the previous one because it prevents some natural disasters, some attack surfaces, some attack vectors of natural disasters. But that also increased the possibility of theft. So you just simply replicate everything in different places, and it's more likely you will get stolen. Yeah, and some of people they want to. Some people they also told us they really wanted to put their recovery phrase in their friend's place, but they cannot just simply replicate that because their friends may have some malicious actions on them about stealing their crypto assets. So then some people they split their recovery phrase. For example, there's 24 words, and then they put like 16 words at home and another 16 words at one of his friend's place. This is okay to use actually, but you should be really careful if you're using 12 words recovery phrase. If you're using 12 words recovery phrase, and you put 6 words in your friend's place, so your friend can brute force attack for the other 6 words, and
Mm.
that's really dangerous. And after our calculation, if you use a mining rig to do that brute force attack, it only takes a modern mining rig, less than 5 minutes to get your recovery phase, to brute force attack your recovery phase. So that's not dangerous. That's not safe. That's really risky. But if you are using 24 words and brute force attack 12 words, that's not easy. And that takes, if I remember correctly, I think that takes around uh, like uh, $100 million to $1 billion of the cost to brute force attack, because we do the calculation based on how much electricity the mining rig will cost to brute force attack that. So that's the thing. And then we come with a better solution, which is Shamir backup. Basically, Shamir backup is based on the cryptographic algorithm called Shamir secret sharing. So it can split your recovery phase into several shares. And for example, you can set as 5 shares. You can also set that at least the 3 shares can reconstruct your recovery phase. With this, if your friend wanted, even though they have like one piece or one share of your backup of your Shamir backups, they cannot do that. Or they can have 2 shares. Maybe they steal another share from your office. They can still not do that because you set the threshold as 3 out of 5. Then you can reconstruct the recovery phase. So this is Shamir backup, and also our solution for Shamir backup is compatible with Trezor, which means that if one day your Keystone is broken and you cannot easily buy a Keystone from a vendor or from us, then you can purchase a Trezor, and we use the same algorithm at Trezor. So with the same recovery phrase, with the same Shamir backup, you can get exactly the same private keys and exactly the same Ethereum addresses, accounts, this kind of thing. So that's Shamir backup. And also there's some uh, downsides of Shamir backup. One big downside, one big con is that right now only Trezor and our product implement Shamir backup. So we are also looking forward that many software wallets, they also implement this so that the solution is more compatible, is more universal, and it's less possible for people to get a single point failure on this kind of situation.
I see. I think we're nearing the end of our podcast, this particular
Okay.
episode. So before I close,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it's sort of a rite of passage. It's just the standard question we must all ask to any
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoiner. Who do
Mm-hmm.
you think is Satoshi Nakamoto?
Who do I think is Satoshi Nakamoto? Actually, I really wanted don't make the guess, and I wanted to encourage everyone to forget about Satoshi Nakamoto, because in just like I mentioned in a Bitcoiner's eyes, it's really important to avoid the single point of failure. It's really important to be decentralized, as decentralized as possible, and that's the ultimate path to get financial sovereignty and to get your privacy, to get protected for your digital assets. So yeah, I just wanted to, I don't want to make the guess, and I don't think, and I also don't want to Satoshi Nakamoto to appear one day. I just wanted to avoid this single point failure.
Thank you. I think that's a
Thank you.
perfectly valid answer. That's a perfectly valid answer, and I absolutely understand the where that is from. Well, thank you very much, Lisi, for answering my questions and coming on to the Pyrite podcast. Well, dear listener,
Mm-hmm.
if you found this interesting, please subscribe and turn on notifications for the Pyrite podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Follow Keystone Protocol. Follow Keystone. Buy their product if you want to. Find out about their work on Twitter, Medium, and Discord. Thank you for listening, and we will soon see you all again sometime in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.